Formula One fans are no strangers to drama. The track battles, the high-speed rivalries, the unpredictable moments that keep everyone on the edge of their seats. But this year, something more is happening, something that goes beyond the pit stops, the race results, and the championship standings. It's a battle that's playing out in the media, where one man, Max Verstappen, is taking on the British press. Now, we all know Max doesn't shy away from a challenge on the track. He's the defending champion, and his dominance in recent seasons has been nothing short of remarkable. But off the track, a war has been quietly brewing. A war between Verstappen and the British media, and it's starting to get personal. So, what sparked it? Why does Max feel the press is out to get him? And more importantly, why is his father now stepping in to defend him? The 2024 Formula One season has been one of the most talked about years in recent memory, but there's one storyline that's been unfolding away from the track one that involves Max Verstappen, his family, and the British media. While the fans and pundits have been buzzing about the championship fight, there's been a separate narrative building, and it's all about how Verstappen feels he's being portrayed by the press. It started with a comment Max made after the Brazilian Grand Prix, a race he dominated from start to finish. With a commanding 19-second victory over his rivals, he had every reason to celebrate. But instead of focusing solely on his win, he took aim at the press, accusing them of being biased against him. Max has always been outspoken about what he sees as an unfair portrayal of his driving and personality, especially when it comes to the British media, which he believes shows favoritism toward British drivers, particularly those racing for British teams. To understand why Max feels this way, you need to look at the history of his relationship with the media. Over the years, he's been the subject of intense scrutiny, some of it deserved, some of it, in his opinion, overblown. After all, he's a fierce competitor, and he doesn't shy away from tough on-track battles. But off the track, he's often been painted in a more controversial light, particularly by journalists from the UK. Max's frustration reached its peak in Brazil. Despite his dominant performance, he found himself questioning the absence of British journalists at his post-race press conference. Did they have to run to the airport? Or maybe they didn't know where the press conference was. He remarked, clearly annoyed that, after his spectacular victory, the British media wasn't there to cover it. It was a bold move, and one that didn't go unnoticed. For Verstappen, the message was clear: the British press doesn't give him the respect he believes he deserves. And that's not all. His father, Jos Verstappen, has since joined the fray, defending his son and claiming that his remarkable triumph in Brazil should be enough to silence any remaining critics. Jos didn't hold back, criticizing both the media and the pundits who've been quick to question Max's style and abilities. It's a tension that's been building for some time. As Max continued to dominate the 2024 championship, the media's coverage shifted from admiration to criticism, especially after a few controversial moments earlier in the season. Max and his supporters have had enough of the so-called bias, and it's clear that the relationship between Verstappen and the British press has hit a boiling point. Max Verstappen's 2024 Formula One season has been a showcase of excellence, but it hasn't come without its fair share of controversy. While he's been consistently at the top of the standings, it hasn't been all smooth sailing. After 3 years of almost total dominance, fans and experts alike were hoping for a more competitive title fight. The rise of Lando Norris with his surprise win in Miami seemed to bring a fresh spark to the championship race, injecting some much-needed excitement into the season. But what fans didn't anticipate was just how personal the rivalry between Norris and Verstappen would get, especially when it spilled over into the media. The tension between Max and the British press has been simmering for months, but it really came to a head after his performance at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Verstappen's win was more than just a victory, it was a statement. He made a blistering comeback from 17th on the grid, overcoming a red flag, a grid penalty, and a wet track to take the race by over 20 seconds. It was an incredible display of skill, and it solidified his place at the top of the 2024 standings. Yet, instead of basking in the glory of his flawless performance, Max had a different message for the journalists in attendance. At the post-race press conference, Max couldn't help but point out the absence of the British press. "I appreciate all of you being here," he said, referring to the Brazilian reporters present, "but I don't see any British press. Did they have to run to the airport, or are they just not interested in coming?" It was a cheeky jab, and one that clearly struck a nerve. Max, who's been the subject of much criticism over the years, was frustrated. He felt that despite his achievements, the British media, especially those from outlets that cover British drivers, were quick to overlook his success. It wasn't just the British press that Max was taking aim at. The criticism he's received this season from certain F1 pundits, including Johnny Herbert and Damon Hill, had also left a bitter taste. Both former drivers have been vocal in their disapproval of some of Max's on-track behavior, particularly his aggressive moves on rivals like Norris. Hill, in particular, has been one of the loudest voices questioning Max's driving style, labeling it too forceful at times. Max, clearly tired of the constant questioning of his tactics, fired back after his dominant performance in Brazil. After Max Verstappen's dominant performance in Brazil, it wasn't just the media that took notice. His victory sparked a larger conversation about how he's being perceived in the world of Formula One. While the Dutch driver was celebrating his triumph, the media backlash from earlier in the season was still fresh in his mind. The British press had long been vocal in their critiques, and after the Brazilian Grand Prix, Max made it clear that he was fed up with what he viewed as unfair scrutiny. But it wasn't just the press who were under fire. Max's father, Jos Verstappen, also had a lot to say about the way his son has been treated by both the media and the critics. He was quick to praise Max's performance in Brazil, calling it the perfect answer to those who had been questioning his driving style. Jos took particular aim at the British commentators and journalists, who he felt had been overly critical of Max for far too long. Max has shown he is the best, Jos said in an interview with The Telegraph, adding that those who had been criticizing his son would now have to keep their big mouths shut for a while. Jos didn't hold back when addressing the issue. He defended Max's driving style, which he believes is perfect, particularly in difficult conditions like rain. Max's ability to gain 6 places on the first lap in Brazil, in wet conditions, was a clear display of his skill, and Jos was adamant that no one could question that. There's no need for him to change anything he said. He's always perfect in these conditions. The father's words seemed to echo a sentiment many fans and drivers shared. Max Verstappen's talent and consistency should be celebrated, not constantly picked apart. But of course, Jos wasn't the only one to weigh in on the matter. The media, both British and Dutch, were quick to pick up on his comments. Some saw it as a defense of Max's honor, while others believed it was another shot fired in the ongoing media war between the Verstappens and the press. It was clear that Max and Jos weren't going to let the criticism slide without a response. But this wasn't just about a single race or a personal vendetta. It was about the ongoing treatment of Max in the media, which had been simmering for a long time. For Max, the Brazilian Grand Prix wasn't just a victory on the track. It was his opportunity to show everyone, especially the critics, that he is still the best. And with his father by his side, it seemed clear that they were ready to fight back against the narrative being pushed by certain sections of the media. As Max Verstappen's name continued to dominate headlines, the war of words between the Dutch driver and the British media escalated. It wasn't just the race results or Max's remarkable comeback that was grabbing attention. It was the ongoing feud with the press. After his masterful victory in Brazil, Max had taken another shot at what he believed was the bias of the British media, questioning their absence from his post-race press conference. While some saw this as a lighthearted jab, others, especially British commentators, saw it as a sign of deeper frustration. Max's comments sparked reactions from multiple fronts. One of the more notable responses came from Sky Sports' David Croft, who quickly dismissed the idea that British journalists were intentionally ignoring Verstappen. "There's more to the story than just a soundbite," Croft said, referencing the absence of British media at the press conference. According to Croft, the timing of events during race weekends often leads to conflicting schedules. Journalists, he pointed out, are often covering multiple events at once, and it wasn't uncommon for them to be occupied with other stories. This, Croft argued, was likely the reason for the missing British press members at the conference. Despite this explanation, the tension between Max and certain sections of the British media remained palpable. The underlying issue, it seemed, was a perception of bias. Max felt that the British press often gave him the short end of the stick in favor of their own national heroes. Whether it was commentary on his driving style or the frequent questioning of his every move, Max was frustrated by the narrative that followed him, regardless of his performance on the track. But this wasn't just a matter of a few missing journalists at a press conference. It was part of a larger ongoing battle, one that had been brewing for months. Verstappen had faced intense criticism earlier in the season, particularly after his controversial actions in Austin and Mexico. In Mexico, he had been penalized for a run-in with Lando Norris, which had sparked even more media attention. It was in response to this criticism that Max made his now famous comment about the wrong passport during the Brazilian Grand Prix. With the 2024 season now officially in the books, the question lingered: what's next for Max Verstappen? Will the media war continue to shape his career, or will the focus shift to his incredible achievements on the track? One thing is certain: Max's journey is far from over, and as long as he's behind the wheel, the press will continue to follow his every move. The rivalry between Max and the British media will likely continue to provide headlines for years to come. But for Max, the real battle will always be the one he faces on the racetrack, because, at the end of the day, that's the only place where he truly feels at home.